Recording. Remind all of you that there is a survey in the chat, and so after we're done, if you wouldn't mind completing that, it'll help us just to continue to improve the program. And I would like to thank you all very much for being here today. And I'd like to extend a special thank you to our guest speaker today, Christopher Peters, who's going to talk to us about the myriad of resources that are available here in the ecosystem in San Diego and growing all the time. Constantly, we're evolving, getting more robust resources, and he'll help you to kind of navigate through the very many, and I think sometimes confusing for a lot of people, resources, and show you where to go and where to find things. So with that, I'll pass it over to Christopher and let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what you're going to cover today.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me, Tanya. Pleasure to be here. Excited to have this conversation. I personally think that it's one of the most important ones for any entrepreneur, because every entrepreneur has 10,000 things to do and they can't do them all. And there are other people who can help them do them or do them more efficiently. My background is in digital health acceleration. I worked at a digital health accelerator and co-founded a digital health institute. And that was really aimed at bringing together all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem to help streamline innovation, because it was just a really challenging space to navigate. So that's what really got me interested in ecosystem building. I moved to San Diego about 2.5 years now, so I'm still pretty new and I'm doing my best to learn the ecosystem. I currently work at the Brink SBDC and am doing my best to learn about all the different resources to make sure that our clients are plugged in, also working on programs to collaborate with various organizations, including the REC, which I'm very excited about. So to preface this, I just took a generic definition from Wikipedia. It's actually pretty good, and I decided to go with it because it does a good job of laying out the different stakeholders that are involved. It's certainly something that any organization essentially can be involved in some sort of capacity. They can be support organizations like accelerators, they can be governmental, research, academic, so on and so forth. And San Diego is rich with all of these stakeholders, which is fantastic. And they will help you along your entrepreneurial journey. You should really just assume that these resources exist and seek them out. If you assume that they don't exist, you could end up just expending energy in a direction that you really shouldn't, and might not get some insights that could have been tremendously valuable and helped you along your way. It's also important to note that this is a choose your own adventure, and you should really be intentional with your time, because there are a couple hundred resources listed on a page I'll be sharing momentarily. And I'm sure that that's not all of them. There are probably thousands of organizations in all reality, and what's the best fit for you won't necessarily be the best fit for somebody else, even if they're in a similar situation. So it's important that you understand that these resources are available and that you are very deliberate with how you take advantage of them. I personally recommend coming up with a strategic plan for how you engage with these resources throughout your journey. And a brief disclaimer, I just want to say that these opinions are really my own. And I put my personal email because I'm providing examples of organizations because I want them to be tangible examples for you. And I don't want any of these to be taken as endorsements. They're just simply possible resources that you could use. So I'm trying to provide a list of as many as possible and teach you how to navigate them, but then also get a little bit specific so you can wrap your head around what kinds of programs there are. So goals for the session are to provide an overview of the ecosystem as well as a list of resources, to show examples of those resources, again, not endorsements, just real examples, and to solicit your recommendations and provide a forum for discussion. So actually, Tanya, if you'd please share the link in the chat. The link is actually to edit this presentation, because I would like you to add recommendations to the last slide resources that you think are fantastic, have helped you in the past. Maybe you're a part of them and think that others should take advantage of them. So I just want to be as inclusive here as possible and make sure that we take advantage of the Bring Trust in this meeting today.
Absolutely. And that link is now available there in the chat for everybody. If you want to access it, you can.
Thank you, Tanya. Mm-hmm. And you can also use this as a template for yourself. So you can kind of choose your own adventure using this. I'm not sure if you like the format, maybe you tweak it a little bit. But either way, I think that it's a great way to at least sort of plan out how you be intentional with your time and can help you continue the conversation forward. Again, there's a brain trust here. So many people are familiar with so many resources. As you may have heard Ray mention earlier, it is a tight-knit community. It's a small community. I don't know if I've mentioned a single resource that Tanya hasn't been aware of, for that matter. So it's definitely something where you need to continue these conversations with the right people, and you'll be amazed at how far you get. So for an overview of the ecosystem here, Startup San Diego put together a really great and well-organized slide. And I do have to say that the rec needs to be added to this immediately. So I apologize for its absence here. But it's really interesting how they break the entrepreneurial journey into sort of three categories: curious, committed, crushing it. And then they break those down further. So curious has to do with inspiration, ideation, tinkering, validation, really early stage. And then committed is when you know that you definitely are going through with this, and you start getting into incubators, start going for some seed funding, and then that transitions you over to when you're crushing it. You really have a stable business and you need to grow. You're looking for investment or even an exit at some point. So out of curiosity, I actually can't really see the chat here, but how many of you are familiar with a lot of these resources, or is there a large amount of resources that seem to be new to you?
And excuse me, I was just going to say, if you'd like to raise your hand, we can have people raise their hands and see it that way. How many people are aware of the resources? And I can count how many. Okay, just have a couple of hands raised right now. Three people? Okay.
Okay, wow. So yeah, there are a lot of resources. They're hard to keep track of. I'm fairly familiar with a good number of these. I couldn't go into details about a lot of them, actually. And I know that a lot of them are constantly producing new content, new programs. Like the Brink SBDC, for example, is on there. And I feel like every single week we have a new idea that we're trying to do. And I think that many others are the same as well. It just happens when you have a bunch of entrepreneurial minded people involved in these organizations. I'd also like to point out that there's a breadth of organizations here in terms of the industry as well as the people they serve. So Connect All at the Jacobs Center will do a lot of work for disadvantaged populations. And Launch Bio does a lot with biotech. At Astra is a female-focused accelerator and investment group. So there's definitely something for everyone, which is really interesting, and why it's important to seek out all of the resources available and choose one that's the right fit, because there's a good chance that there's one that's a very good fit for you. Sorry about that. So now we'll go over to this resource list, which was put together by Jonathan Tenenbaum, a volunteer at Startup San Diego, which is quite remarkable. I mean, he didn't do it all, but he did a huge amount of it. Very impressive work. So just looking at this screenshot here, and I'll hop over to the page, it covers experience, robotics, coding, general networking. It's already pretty robust, which is cool. So it's a hyperlink. If we come over to this page, we can scroll down even more, find out there are 189 records here, and you can also suggest changes. So I'm sharing this in part because it is a very robust list, but then also because the more people who buy into this, the better. And so if we all add resources to this list, then this will continue to be the go-to for all things in the startup San Diego, or in the startup ecosystem in San Diego. And there's another one, designing women. It just goes on and on. They're broken down by brick and mortar. So the SD Startup Accelerator, they do life sciences, they do services, brick and mortar, which is important because that's obviously completely different from some of these high tech things. So I absolutely recommend checking out that list of resources, and I think that you'll find some really good stuff. So now to break it down a little bit with some examples by each stakeholder group, going from curious, committed to crushing it with a slightly different spin. I don't just want to take what they took. I think Startup San Diego did a great job of teeing it up, and some of these resources are on there. Some of them are not. But you can also look at these different stakeholder groups and understand how you can really use them a little bit better, how they fit into the different stages, because that's something that wasn't really incorporated into the other slides. So for academic or research institutions, they're just powerhouses. They're involved in so many ways. They can help you with education, funding, general support, be it as an organization that you sell into, since certainly they need to buy just about everything, or help you along with solving problems. So if you're at the curious stage, you might be taking courses yourself, for example, obviously. You could also look to courses to use your company as a class, used for a class project. So those courses can help you with your ideation some. Now it depends, each class is going to be for different things, so that might be more for the committed or crushing it crowd depending on the class, but nonetheless, it's certainly worth exploring and worth building connections in that space. There are also groups, student groups, like I just chose 5 from UCSD because trying to be neutral here, and they seem like they're pretty cool. They're a user experience agency run by UCSD students that I think could be a good resource for someone who's just starting out but wants some high quality work done. From the looks of it, they've done great work. I don't have personal experience with them, but I'm trying to find an excuse because I really like their website, to be honest. Then once you're really committed, you can look to partner with researchers. Now this is interesting because you can use that in a lot of ways. If you can find a way to partner with a researcher, it could mean that you could be a part of their funding when they get, say, an NIH grant or something like that. You can also get the data points that you need. There are also ultimately an inroads for now the crushing it category, where you can partner with the organization or ultimately sell into them. It's just a tremendous way of networking. Now that's not for everybody. Obviously, if you own, let's say, a taco shop, you're probably not going to be finding a research partner as much, or necessarily selling into the organization, although you might. Maybe you could be one that ends up on campus and you've connected with them through the courses. So it's still worth considering exploring. Now for funding, which is always a challenge, and it's how founders spend like 50% of their time, at least at certain stages. You can start off when you're curious with things like GoFundMe, depending. I mean, they have a nonprofit specific area, which is neat. You can also go to various pitch competitions that are geared towards people who are just at the ideation stage, and you can get a couple $1,000s or more, depending. Then once you're committed, you might look into, again, grants. This can be tied into the research partners, or maybe it's your own small business grant. But you certainly don't have to go the investment route if you don't want to. There are non-dilutive ways to get money at the earlier stages. Then I gave the example before of Ad Astra. I really want to mention them because they are focused on female founders, and we all know that women aren't invested in at the rate that men are. And it's really nice that they have a program that's tailored to people who are going through the journey in their own way. And so that's definitely a type of organization that you want to look into. No matter what your situation is, you might want to look for a group that has a specialty in your experience. And then once you're crushing it, and again, we're getting sort of on the line of committed and crushing it, I'd be looking for angel funding. It could be Tech Coast Angels or VC funding if you're beyond that, looking at even more funding, or you could go to WeFunder. And I want to point out that GoFundMe and WeFunder are both San Diego crowdfunding platforms. So I think that that's really cool that no matter where in the world I was, I may have listed those companies, but they both happen to be San Diego founded. So that's pretty fantastic. Now, I know that other people on the call can speak more to the recent changes in how investing works through crowdfunding platforms, but I know that there are some exciting updates that make crowdfunding even more attractive than ever before. Then for support organizations, when you're at an earlier stage, I believe that you all may be familiar with SCORE. I've heard people mention it before, so you can get some mentorship to help you along there. And then a little bit later on, of course, I had to put the Brink SBDC where I work. We try and take people through to crushing it, also host the San Diego Angel Conference, which is good to know that things like that exist because it's not just for raising funding. There's also an entrepreneurship track where entrepreneurs can learn more about how to pitch and get an educational experience as well. There are also more specific groups because the Brink is more generalist. We have specialists in various areas like CMTC, which will provide similar services, but their focus is on manufacturing. And they also have a lot of funding available for companies due to the CARES Act, which is exciting. So if you're looking into manufacturing, they are definitely a good place to look. And then once you're really crushing it, you're a bigger organization, you're probably going to want to look to like the San Diego Regional EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, and they just support tons of large companies. I don't even know how many are on their board, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 200 large organizations almost represented. But either way, that's their thing, is they really help the more mature stage economy, and they're trying to bridge the gap with the earlier stage economy that the Brink SBDC and CMTC are involved with. Then there are also service providers who can help with all those things that are just such a pain, like law. There's the San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program, where you can get free law services, and the HR helpline, which it's kind of funny. It's an open secret that you get 15 minutes free, but you just hang up and call right back and you immediately get another 15 minutes. So that's a great way of getting access to answers for your HR needs very easily without having to stress. And I know that you're also familiar with the Workforce Partnership. I believe that you're partnered with them for some of the work that's being done for your companies. I know that they have, first of all, they're not, like, obviously they're part of Curious, Committed, and Crushing. I just spread them out a little bit because they can really help anybody, since their goal is workforce development. They have, I think 14 programs recently, sent an email, something like that. So many going on. No matter what you need, they can get you funding if you're trying to develop yourself. They can get you opportunities. If you are an organization that needs some help, they will fund some workers for you to help develop them, with the hopes that then you hire them on, which is absolutely fantastic. I love their work, worth looking into at any point. and there are, you know, other organizations like this. They're grant funded. They exist to help people like you. Economic development is really based on small businesses because they become big businesses. So it's just a great place to look and to look into other organizations like that. Now, it's also important to get involved with the community, and this really underpins everything. If you want to be aware of what exists, you need to get your name out there. And at the early stage, I recommend considering meetup groups essentially. It could be like indie hackers. If you're not familiar, that's for people trying to start their own businesses. There's a fantastic blog online where people will answer questions for others. They also have a local meetup here. You can go to Startup San Diego networking events. They also have some programming coming up for Startup Month. I forget if maybe it's going to be September or October. And then there's San Diego Tech Hub. And they are more focused on tech, but they have several pillars, and it includes education. And these people know what other organizations exist. They're just a really good hub to go to learn about all of these others. So if you want to do research, you can just do it naturally, you know, passively, essentially, by getting involved and talking to those people. Same thing with TIE and SDEE, which I believe, Tanya, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's maybe for a little bit more advanced companies, maybe.
So
like
could be some of the teams that we have are probably ready for it. I just wanted to also mention the SD Tech Hub is a lot of our students obviously know them because we are actually partnered with them and we do some events together. So yeah, so a lot of these resources we're all tied together. So yeah. Anyways, but you're
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that, because that's exactly what I'm trying to get, is that all of this stuff, like when you know somebody like Tanya, you know all of these things. You don't realize it, but you go to Tanya, you have a need, she'll know somebody or she'll get you to a group where they know it. So you're never more than 2 degrees away from whatever you need. So entrepreneurship, I know, can be hard and lonely, but the fact that you're never more than 2 degrees away from what you need is really a privilege of being in San Diego. People elsewhere in the country don't have access to the same resources, and there have been some great success stories out of your program for that matter. So you get great mentors, so many communities that you can be involved in. So that's the starting point. Highly recommend looking into those. Now, I also added an other category here because you have to do stuff, right? These others are largely going to tell you how to do things or are going to give you money to do it. Some of them might help a little bit, like the student groups, FI at UCSD that I mentioned earlier. One organization, I love that Tanya was familiar with this as well. After ID, I couldn't find the link. I don't know why, but it's this fantastic market research organization where you fill something out quickly and they can get you hundreds or thousands of responses for pennies of what it would cost you elsewhere. So if you're looking for idea validation, it's a really good place to start. Then another thing is that entrepreneurs are probably project managers to start. You really need to delegate that list of 10,000 things to do. Some things aren't worth your time. Some things maybe you don't have the skill set for. You need somebody else to do it. You can look to platforms, other resources such as Fiverr, where maybe you can get a website for $50 or something like that. And somebody who just does it day in and day out can whip up a website that looks really good for you. Now, I know that you have access to other resources that Tanya has put together. Fiverr can do marketing or whatever. It's just a freelance website. There are tons of them. You can find other freelancers around town. That's just a really accessible program, and I wanted to mention it because you know that you can get a lot of these little things done for cheap. You don't need to go to the most expensive best place, but you want to get something out that works. Places like this are a great start. And then another resource, there are various places that will help with pitches and presenting. Toastmasters and 1 Million Cups, they'll help you refine those skills that are really essential to raising money or being a leader in general. So if you go to Toastmasters or 1 Million Cups, they'll give you the experience of presenting in front of others, and you will be much more comfortable and confident in yourself as a leader. So that wraps up what I've just put down as some general ideas, resources that exist. Maybe something like this could work for you. Maybe every single resource looks totally different for your situation. Like I said, do the research on all those things that exist, reach out to Tanya. But here, now there's a page where it's blank, and you can fill this out with resources that you recommend, or use this as a template yourself, just to say, oh, well, I need to work on my presentation skills. So that goes in the other category. You put a couple there. Maybe there's a coding class or something you throw in, you know, what sort of funding route you want to go, but just kind of map out who you want to be involved with. And really only 1 or 2 resources should fit in these boxes. And I would not encourage you personally to get involved in 10 organizations, because you can only be involved in so much depth with so many organizations. So if any of you want to start filling this out now while we're on the call, go for it. Again, you can just copy this document if you want to work from this later. I hope that you like the format. I hope that you can improve upon it. I hope that you see it as a value add for your experience. And I'm sure that Tanya has thousands of ideas and how to use it or to improve it.
I thank you so much for sharing this. I absolutely love this idea. And all of you, if you're welcome to go ahead and go into the chat, grab that link that I just put there into the chat, and start filling it out. This link is, like Christopher said, it's editable. We all get to see what you put in there. So as long as you don't make a copy for yourself first, we can see that those shared responses. So please do feel free to go in there and do that. I love this. I love this. So I'd like to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions, we do have Christopher a little longer here. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask at this time? Comments? You can also put your questions in the chat if you'd rather. So, okay, so we do have a question about the after idea. And so I was using that resource also. I know that I've shared it with some of the students as well, but I'm trying to find it myself, and I'm having a hard time finding the link also. Maybe we have the name wrong, I don't know. But if you have that, definitely please do share that with us. Anybody else? But Chris, you've looked for that link as well, and we're...
Yeah, I spent a decent amount of time, and I was just banging my head up against the wall, because I'm so glad you used it, because it's such a good resource. The data that they provide is very, very helpful.
We'll find it. We'll find it. Anybody out there have it? Okay. The name is, so I thought the name was, it's after idea, or idea after idea, something like this.
I thought it was after idea. It's been a little while. It just came to my head. It's like, oh, I need to share that one, and find it.
We talked about this class when we had the workshop with those of you who are in the entrepreneurship program here at the RAC. We talked about it with Max, in our workshop with Max. No. At any rate. So do we have any other questions, comments from the audience? Quiet group today.
Well, did you learn something new and useful?
Oh, and remember, you are muted, by the way. You are muted, so you need to unmute yourself if you want to speak. All right, everybody, let's turn on our cameras. I know what we'll do here. We're going to stop sharing. Yeah, stop sharing the screen. Great. And if you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras, everyone, so we can see everybody. Hello, hello, hello. All right, so then, Chris, you were asking the question, did you learn anything? What did you guys think?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I was just researching and looking up all of those foundations whilst you were asking that. So I just have a lot of stuff to kind of pour through and sort out and see where I can be find use of. But thank you. I mean, that's a great amount of stuff.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
On We Founders, just so you guys know, do you remember Grow Guru, Chris? That the guys who were in
Yes.
SDC? So this is a company that's been out in production. They're a startup. They're in Evo Nexus. They're one of my mentee companies there. And what's interesting is they ended up in SDAC as one of the finalists. They didn't make it the top three, but they were in the finals. And after all of that, and they're still looking for money, they went through the We Funder and they raised over $700,000 on that. So this is just one of those concepts that you can kind of think about no matter what stage you're in. It turns out I had no idea, right? I didn't really think that would work out for them, but it did very, very well. So I noticed you had that up there and crushing it, and that is a significant thing for them because generally when people come in front of the angel groups, they're looking anywhere from about 250 to about 600, 700. Do not ask. Oh, by the way, guys, never ask for $2 million. That is the 1.5 upwards to 2.5. You never ask for. You know why? It's the death space for it doesn't fit any model. So if you're going to ask for money, make sure you're under, you're lower generally than 1.5 or 1.2. Just depends on what you do.
Yeah, thanks for adding that there, Ray. We did have a couple of questions about VC funding. Christopher, do you have a recommendation of who you would go to if you were seeking VC funds? Is there some favorites, or how do they make that decision about which of the many to choose from?
So that's a loaded question. Two, I'm honestly not very familiar with VC in San Diego because one, that's a little bit more mature. But I will say that it's important that it's kind of like getting married. Like it's a big deal. These people are investing a lot of money. They're going to have a lot to say about how you run your company. And, money travels. So whatever route you go, just make sure that you feel very comfortable with them. Now, if anybody else who has more experience wants to add, I've only interned at a VC firm. So that's as far as I've gotten.
I was going to say, I know I see some VC funders or angel investors in the audience here. Does anybody want to add anything? Plug your funds. So Ray, I know you want to say something. Do you want to say anything here? No. Okay.
No, there's so many variants
This
on
is
that.
a loaded question. I know it's a tough one.
So if I put my hat on as a TCA member, for it's just so different in terms of how you deal with the whole financial aspect. But I will tell you one thing that is really, really critical, and I haven't done that well yet, even in my own company. You need to have a cheerleader, evangelist, somebody who really believes in you, who is known in the circle. That is a must, because your pedigree kind of plays into it, how well they believe that you're going to get to the finish line. But if you don't have that cheerleader, joined to you at your hip, the chances of you getting money from any of these groups is pretty diminished, except for maybe We Funder, where it's a lot more utopian, right? It's spread out, but seriously, you need to find that cheerleader.
And I have another, thank you for that. Christopher, we have another question about when is the best time to seek funds? When is the best time to look for Kickstarter funds or We funds or any kind of crowdfunding, angel funds? What is that for you? What is that turning point when they need to start thinking about getting funding?
As far as thinking, early. Now it's never too early to start thinking, and that strategy is significant because you're looking at how much of your company you're giving up. If you're seeking dilutive funding, it's a totally different route than non-dilutive funding. You might have a business that's more attractive to angel investors who are looking for 10x. You might be a shoe-in for a 5x, but they don't want to invest because they're looking for that 10x. So even though you have a tremendous business, you might be looking for a different funding route than somebody else. So there are a lot of factors, and that's something where you just get advisors, those mentors who are very familiar with raising funding, get a lot of opinions. Don't just go with one, and make sure that you feel comfortable. Oh, thank you for the question. Yeah, 5x or 10x. It's the multiple on how much you've invested, how much you get in return. So they want to make 10 times the money they've put in. Yes.
And so I want to reemphasize, and now I'm going to put my TCA hat on. I don't know if you guys know I'm an angel investor. I will tell you, you come in front of us with a 5x proposition, we will not do you. Most likely, because we've got, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 others 10 to 20x's potential, right? I mean, this is all hoopla anyhow. But if your projected timeline only shows you to be a 5x or a 6x, we're going to take the 10 or 15 or 20x, because if we're already taking a risk and we're going to have to spend all the time for due diligence and everything that is associated with what we need to do with your company to give you money, why not spend all of that time and energy for a company that might get us bigger bang for our buck?
It goes right back to what we always say. It takes the same amount of energy and effort to start a small company as it does to start a company that's scalable with growth potential. So you may as well put the energy and the efforts into that company that's going to make you.
And puffery is absolutely allowed. We get it. I mean, if you, the worst thing you guys could ever do is do a 5 to 7 year projection that is too realistic. Because what it does, I hate to say it, but the truth of the matter is we expect a little puffery, right? We expect you to embellish. That's a legal term for embellishment. But basically, it's allowed and it's expected.
It's more expected, yeah.
And so if you're not doing a 5 to 7 year projection of trying to reach, you know, for 10 or 15x, and you don't have a concept of how to do that, figure it out. Go talk to people like Chris or other people around, right? And try to figure out how you can project and show that you have the potential to reach out to 15 to 20x, okay?
So thank you very much. So I'd like to now take a photo, if everybody wouldn't mind. So those of you who'd like to be in the photo, please do turn on your camera. Please do turn on your camera. And we're going to take a photo here together. And blah.
And I do also want to note that Alexa Ray, the executive director of Startup San Diego, is here. I mentioned Startup Month, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on which month it is. If Alexa Ray, if you'd like to make a note of any of your upcoming programming, that'd be fantastic.
Alexa, are you there?
She may have hopped off.
Yeah, she might have hopped off. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take a screenshot. If any of you want to as well, we're going to do 3, 2, and 1. Cheese. Great, everybody. Thanks. Appreciate it. Great. And thank you so much, Christopher, for being here. Thank you all for being here. It was wonderful, as usual. This was great advice. I really appreciate you sharing the advice that you did share. And if you want to go ahead and take us out with any closing comment.
Don't hesitate to reach out to me or anyone. You know, gumption is great to have. So if you ever have the thought, oh, I should reach out, just go ahead and do it, and you'll get some great responses.
We're here to help you. We're here to help. Yeah.
Especially when you're a student. Everyone responds to students.
Play that student card. All right. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the